as we are waiting for people who are just about joining in, I think it would also be nice for us to begin with just to take stock of who we have in the room today and what's the background of everyone. But let me just also begin by introducing myself. So I am Arjuna Srinidhi. I anchor the EcoBari Collaborative, and I'm also a senior researcher at the Watershed Organization Trust. So welcome everybody. And here I would ask my colleagues to share a small survey, just a couple of questions to understand who we have today with us, and that will also probably help the speakers understand where your questions are coming from. So Anukriti, can you launch the polls? So yeah, we just have a couple of short questions. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter which region, like north or south, or which state you're coming from, but I think from an ecosystem point of view, we'd be curious to know what what's the agroecological zone that you come from. Is it the mountainous regions, plains like the Indo-Gangetic Plain, central India, semi-arid part of India, coastal regions, or perhaps you live in an urban jungle and don't really relate to any of these, and so you can then also click on others. Also curious to know how you heard about us. So the second question is about which whether it was an email that you received from Water, EcoBari, or a WhatsApp message, or on social media. And finally, since this webinar and many of our upcoming webinars all will focus on the topic of EbA, we're just curious to know, okay, how many people are familiar with this concept? I'm sure there are nuances which we would still like to learn about, even if we are, but maybe there are some who are curious, haven't really come across this till now. So great, I think with about the participants who have joined already, we have a good understanding. So we have a fair number of people from the plains and semi-arid areas, but also a few from hilly and coastal. And then it's also good to see that a majority of you are familiar with the concept of EbA. So we are talking to quite an audience that is well aware of this issue, and so we can start from that level and then go deeper into the session. So for your interest, we're also just sharing the results so that you can also see what the session today consists of, the participation in terms of participation. All right. So I think we can begin with the session now. That with this understanding, it's great to see all those who have already joined and who are in the session today. We had I think close to 250 registrations, so I'm sure there'll be many more joining in a few minutes, a short while, or perhaps looking to catch a recording of the session. But all that is most welcome. We're happy to have with us our distinguished speakers for today, Dr. Sonali Shinde, Dr. Neha Bharbare, and Dr. Ishwar Kale, whom we'll introduce properly in due course. And I think it's good to note that the session is being organized in a traditional Zoom meeting format, not a webinar format. We thought this might be better to facilitate a more open discussion towards the later part of the session. However, we do request that apart from this current speaker, everybody else keeps their mics on mute so that we just have better clarity. But of course, during the discussion and the Q&A time, you are most welcome to also speak up. And also throughout the session, feel free to use the chat box, drop in any questions or comments that you have. And with these housekeeping rules points out of the way, I think let's just dive into today's session. So This session is being organized as a part of the Southbound Resilience webinars, which is hosted by EcoBari. And and what we have planned for today is a brief introduction of EcoBari, which I will do soon. And then we'll have Dr. Ishwar Kale set the context for today's session in particular. We'll have two very interesting presentations from Dr. Sonali Shende and Dr. Neha Bhadbare. This will be followed up by sufficient time for discussions, question and answers. And then we'll have Dr. Marcela D'Souza, who will help us draw the session to a close at the end. So about EcoBari, we are a collaborative of diverse institutions and individuals, all working towards upscaling ecosystem-based adaptation, or EbA, in one way or another. And what do we mean by EbA? There are many formal definitions that are available in literature, but in simple terms, in practice, what we mean by this is any intervention or process that addresses these three pillars. So first of all, it improves the health of the ecosystem. Secondly, it's got an element of equitable and participatory governance embedded within it. And thirdly, through the interventions, there is a set of co-benefits that also help to reduce social and environmental vulnerabilities. So when this is present, I mean, we consider that to be an ecosystem-based adaptation initiative. And that's what this collaborative of EcoBari is working towards. We are very proud to share that we are already a network of about 18 organizations, 9 of which who had come together to found this collaborative in 2021. And then we have also grown to double that with a lot of new members joining us in this year as well, including institutions and individuals. But it's when we come to this webinar series itself, just to share what we are looking to achieve through this, it's basically that we believe that there are a number of good practices and evidence-based learnings that are out there already in India and in the global South. And we intend to share these good practices through these webinars because we feel that there's no need to reinvent the wheel every time. And we can learn from the remarkable work done by the various organizations who are practicing these EbA-related projects and interventions. And in this regard, we can, and this is how we can leverage on the strengths and the knowledge that is already available and build on it to help build better climate resilience going forward. So, and to do this, we hope to organize these webinars every alternate month with a specific focus each time. So it could be on water management, on agriculture, forest resources and biodiversity, perhaps in the future, and other such topics. So that was just a brief introduction to what we have in store for us today. And I think it's time for us to delve deeper into today's, this webinar's topic of water governance for EbA. And to do this, I would like to introduce the moderator for today's session, Dr. Ishwar Kale. Ishwar, as many of you know, is an expert in water governance and has a PhD on the subject. His emphasis on water stewardship in arid regions, coupled with a proficiency in climate adaptation, governance, and research is highlighted in by his co-authorship of the book Water Governance Standards, Making Water Everybody's Business, published by Water. He's also the co-author of Social Exclusion in Water Management, a book published by the Cambridge University Press. So Ishwar, you also have the important task of helping us keep the presentations to within 15 minutes. So feel free to exercise your rights as you seem appropriate. And I hand over the session to you now.
Thank you, Arjuna. And I welcome all audience and the two speakers into this very interesting discussion. Briefly, I will set the contours for this 1 hour discussions, and the larger points will be discussed into this the debate. I'm sure that we all are agreed that water is seen as the fundamental resource, or like a life-giving resource and it's also a very important ecosystem. Along with that, it's very connecting resource for different ecosystem services, like this we see this forest or this river systems, or even this we see this like agriculture as an overall ecosystem. So we can't imagine this ecosystem without the water resource. However, we see that this water resource, which is a very precious resource, is facing a very severe threat in terms of the overexploitation. At the same time, we also see this whole impact of climate change in terms of this whole changing the monsoon cycle, doing this whole runoff cycle, which is very important for this groundwater recharge. So there is this whole overexploitation, and even the whole climate angle is a bigger threats to this water resource, we can say. I think when we see that the blue water and the green water, so a lot of discussion is always that when we see this blue water, always our imagination is that water is impounded into this water harvesting structures, which is more visible to the eyes. So that's the dominant paradigm is there. But also it's very important that groundwater is seen a very important resource. Along with that, the green water that is captured into the soil moisture, that is also the very important the resource or the form of water we can say, which is many times get neglected. When it comes to the governance part, as shown by Arjuna in the earlier one slide, this participatory governance, the equity, water sharing, the inclusiveness into the governance is a very crucial part of this, the ecosystem-based adaptation or the dominant, the development we see. But when we see this overall participatory nature or the inclusiveness of the governance, the one thing clearly come into the picture is the ownership of water. So who own the water or who own the water resource at the larger level? We see that historically this whole water rights are tied with the land ownership, because due to this old Easement Act, it has been said that landowners has the right of the water below the ground. And I remember that the late water experts Ramaswamy Ayerji always used to say that water is attached like a chattel to the land property. So it's very unimaginable to separate it with the current practices. But it's also true that only land ownership don't decide or don't determine the availability or access to water. Because nowadays we see that financial the capabilities or the power of purchasing is also very crucial in access to water. Interestingly, in American West, there is an old saying which say that water usually runs downhill, but it always runs uphill to money. So it means that the resource poor as always have the secondary chances where there is the resource rich has the bigger shares, bigger opportunities in accessing the water. We can see that basically the different legal laws, policies are saying that water is seen as a private, the public property, the common public trust. But at practice, we can easily see that there are different type of tools like dug wells, boreholes, pump ponds that are seen like the nature of the water the privatization which is taking place. So it is clearly seen that although laws and policies are more liberal, the practice is little very different. And it is also when it come to the surface water, or we say that like this whole tanks or because we have a very long history of this whole participatory irrigation management. Yeah, into that, this whole the age-old flood system into the North Maharashtra or the Malgojari tank system into the Vidarbha, And even this, the Kudi Marammat system in Tamil Nadu of this tank management are the important example of this participatory water management, participatory irrigation management. But nowadays we see that there's a lot of no interest of these communities to harness this water, to manage these systems. And these systems are taken by the state administration for the operation and the maintenance part. So therefore, this whole PIM is very crucial to understand that whether who own this water resources, who have the access, whether the only landowners get more water access, or whether this water resource people ignore the right of the resource poor people. So I think there are very important initiatives in the states and across the different states also, but there are a lot of efforts to include or make this whole PIM as an inclusive in a nature. So today we'll talk on that. But along with that, there was also very interesting transit we can see into this water management. So whole this digital apps, even this whole, we can say this digital tools are very crucial, and they are taking place to increase the overall accountability, transparency, even the speed up this whole process of the planning and management at the water management level. So you can see the n number of this application of artificial intelligence like machine learning, and that is converted for making the decisions or enabling making the decision making at the local level. So this is also the crucial part, how these digital tools are enabling this overall governance system into the water management. So with this background, I think the contours for this discussion will be this whole water sharing through the groundwater or this surface irrigation through canals or the groundwater system. At the same time, how this whole digital revolution is enabling this overall decision making into the water sector. So with these two major contours, I will invite Dr. Sonali Shinde. So Sonali Shinde is a managing trustee of Gram Gaurav Pratishthan, but more popularly, the word knows it like a Pani Panchayat movement. Dr. Sonali Shinde is a managing trustee of Gram Gaurav Pratishthan, and she is taking forward the whole legacy of late respected Vilasrao Shinde and then Kalpana Tai, who started this overall the initiative in the Maharashtra. So I hand over to Dr. Sonali and request her to make a presentation in a brief for 15 minutes so that we can have a chance more for the discussion and answers. So Dr. Sonali Shinde, please.
You're on mute, Dr. Sonali.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you, Ishwar, for inviting me for this lecture. I would like to present the work of Pani Panchayat. It was founded by my father and mother, Kalpana Tai and Vilasrao Salunkhe. And it started way back in 1972 when there was a severe drought in Maharashtra. So, yeah, let's see the... Can you give the sharing this thing, Arjuna?
Yeah, you see the green
yes,
share screen?
I can share it.
Okay. Are you sharing it, Anukruti?
I'm sharing it. Can you give me a moment?
Okay. So basically the work started in the region of Maharashtra, and This is a Purandar Tehsil, which is about 1 hour 38 kilometers from Pune city. And Purandar is a rain shadow area. So the rainfall is, average rainfall is around 450 mm. This year it's very less rainfall everywhere. And so every few years there is people have to experience this drought situation. And Vilasrao Salunkhe, my father, was an engineer, very well established in Pune, but in the 72 drought, he visited this Purandar region. And he was very much affected by the plight of the people who were just breaking the stones. And he could not understand the relation of breaking the stones and how we can relieve the drought situation. So he talked with the people, the villagers, even the government officials. And there were many challenges when he visited all these villages. So there was scanty rainfall, degraded environment, barren lands, very poor yield. And government was focused on creating some medium and minor irrigation projects where water was given mainly to the downstream people, but the upstream people or the villages were not considered. Yes, next. So Vilasrao took a 40-acre of land, which was barren, and it belonged to a temple. And then he did all water management, soil conservation, water harvesting, making a percolation tank, and through the well, the water was distributed to this 40 hectare of land. So within 2-3 years, there was a change in this barren land. There was increased food grain. There was a small forest created, fodder for the livestock, employment generation for 5 households. And the whole land got cultivated and transformed. And so the villagers were very curious to see all these experiments, and they started coming, they started having conversations, and village meetings took place in our house. And then the concept of Pani Panchayat came into existence. Next. So all members of the community, including the landless, have the right of water. So irrigation schemes were undertaken for a group of farmers rather than the individual. And water was allocated on the basis of members of the family rather than the proportion of the land holding. So if a 5 people family, 2.5 acre irrigation was assured. So at least 8-month irrigation, if it is assured, you can imagine that period of 74 to 85. So there were very less needs also. And so a family could do their living with this kind of land water availability. And cropping was restricted to seasonal crops like jawar, millets, basically vegetables. But sugarcane, bananas, and onion was not allowed because the less rainfall, water availability, and water should be given to everybody. And water rights were not attached to the land rights. If the land is sold, the water rights came to the community. And so these were the principles, and people were in such a plight during the drought that they all accepted. Whenever they started a community lift irrigation scheme, they came together, they followed the discipline, and they also contributed 20% of the amount of the lift. And for that, I still remember there are so many stories that people's women sold their ornaments and they contributed for this community lift irrigation. And that time everything used to be ready, and then the electricity was not there. So people had to wait for the electricity for many years, in spite of requesting to the government, MSCB making follow. But there were no poles in many of the villages. But still, during this period, like from 74 to 85, nearly 51 lift irrigation schemes took place in Purandar. And they were all successful. People did very good farming practices. They had increased income. Reverse migration happened during that period. And then this principle of equitable distribution of water, responsibility of planning. So people feel that this belongs to them, and implementing, administration, everything was taken care by the people. There was a lot of change in the irrigation and income generation, and water was not different, like drinking water, domestic consumption, and protected agriculture was the use from the saved water. Now today we see on the drinking water schemes, we are spending crores of rupees. So that time, at least the water had purity. Now so many villages in Purandar, there are 108 villages in Purandar, but 40 villages are receiving the polluted water of Pune city without, they are not making any treatment on this water, and it is given to these 40 villages. So there is another problem has raised in Purandar. Yes, next. Next. So, these Pani Panchayat principles were advocated at the policy level and various state and national and international levels also. So many politicians visited Naigaon model, and then it was replicated in Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, in Orissa also. Somehow it was seen by most of the politicians, but it never got implemented at the policy level. Because as we all know that Maharashtra has more focus on the sugarcane lobby is very strong in Maharashtra. So that is, that's why so much water we have, but still only 30% of Maharashtra is irrigated. And only we see water availability at the command area, but not at the tail land. Tail land farmers are not receiving the water. So there is lack of management, what we see today. Yes, next. At that time, next. Yeah, next slide.
It's not moving.
Not moving.
Just a moment. I'll just reshare my screen.
So in 1980s, the Naigaon story became very popular, and all other villages started visiting Naigaon and seeing the difference, and they wanted to implement the same community lift irrigation scheme. So people from Mahur, which is about 20 kilometers from Saswad, came to Naigaon, and then they discussed the scheme, and then they wanted to contribute also. So it took them, to collect 32,000 of amount. It took them 6 months that time. So in 1980, so they had a dam, but they could not lift the water. And then Vilas Rao followed up with the government officials, and they took the permission and to lift the water, and it can be supplied to the Mahur village, where people were not doing farming at all because of not availability of water. And they were just living like Adivasis, means, and going after the cattle like that. But after this scheme happened, the Mahur scheme, which was initiated by Pani Panchayat and villagers, and so many people came back from Mumbai. They were living in Mumbai in a very bad conditions, like they call it Saitan Basti of Mumbai. We have seen the pictures, and my Vilas Rao often visited Mumbai to see the plight of these farmers in Mumbai. So they all came back to Mahur and started doing agriculture because of availability of water. And then their prosperity came within years. They started different initiative they took. They did flower farming, and they got very good price for the flowers, and the whole village changed. Next. They constructed their own school, The main crops now also are flowers, vegetables, millets, and they have a little more rainfall there, around 800 to 900 mm. So they do sugarcane also, peanut, and population is 2,700 around, and 1,600 hectares of area of this village. And this water source, the Mahur tank is, percolation tank is 84 MCFT, and which was built by government and made available to the people by Pani Panchayat. And so 35 members had 50 acres of land, which was, distributed equally within them, and they shared the water. Yes, next. And so that picture which I showed of my father, it is taken in Mahur in the flowers, and people really appreciate his work, and they have a every house has a puja house, so they put my father's picture there because their life changed after this project. And it is a really pleasure to share this success story of Pani Panchayat, because the Mahur is still running very successfully. The government has handed over this dam to the community in 2005, and there are 96 community lift irrigation managed by the people, and irrigation to 800 acre throughout the year. Before, when the government was managing it, it was only for the 8 months. In February, the water used to stop, but now they have 12 months of assured water. And even in between, when there was in 2012, there was a drought situation in Purandar. So during that period, Mahur people decided not to take sugarcane crop, and they grew fodder crops and provided it to the, we call it Chara Chhauni, where all the animals are come together and they live there during the drought period. So Mahur provided the fodder to these people, and they got recognition from the government also. So reverse migration has happened. New generation is doing the farming. So many of them have jobs also, but they are also doing agriculture in their holidays, in the morning, evening hours. So that is the beauty of this project, that the new generation, once they know that the basic thing required for a good agriculture is water. So once the availability is there, the new generation is thinking this, taking this as a profession also. And crop diversity, crop planning, market linkage is there. Now they have started fishery also in the dam. There are the references I have shared. Vasudha and Ganesh Pangare have written a book also on this. Then there are many articles on Mahur. You can see on the internet also. Next. So,
Dr. Sonali, just a request. Will you just wrap up in next 2-3 minutes, please?
Yes, yes. So this is the head of the Mahurzai lift, and people are happy. Just take quickly, Anukruti, all the pictures, and this is the book I was talking. This is the average rainfall of Purandar. Yeah, next. And then, I had shared with you another one, no? We are skipping this. So you can go to the last one. Yeah. These are the different programs with participation of people. Usually we do the interventions in the villages. Next. And even the old structures now, rejuvenation of the old structures is the work which is very important with the community participation. We are also conducting the watershed course for the students. Yes, next. Yeah. So way ahead, what we find is doing work in all these villages is ecosystem and human interface is very important. Land use and cropping pattern, then the crop and water requirement, soil productivity, and processing. Now, Purandar has a lot of fruit orchards. So there is huge scope of processing, value addition, and big market is there in India as well as abroad. Storage and pricing, local institutions should be involved, and a political leadership in the villages. and convergence of the community, political will, and academic knowledge. So colleges should be connected, and corporate resource also. So we are now many good corporates are working in this region with the villages. Next. Yeah, the last one. Next slide. So localization of the economy and globalization of the information and knowledge and technology are the alternative development strategies. That's what we are trying to introduce now. Yes, next. So you all are welcome to visit Mahur, Pani Panchayat. There are many other villages also where we have replicated similar projects. Every village, I feel, has a different geography. And according to that, if we implement the projects and involve the community, then it is a long-lasting project with involvement of the beneficiaries and their belonging to the project. So, and still it is the need of the time. I feel that during, we have seen from my father worked, and now also many of the villages are having the same situation. They need the same kind of work. And now it is more with the technology and the availability of the modern techniques, it is much easier to do this work. But the human nature is changing very quickly. Now everybody is becoming little self-centered. So in the small communities, we see the change happening very positively. The villages which are close to the city, it becomes very difficult to convince them about the equity and the distribution. But in the small, what we call is small is beautiful. So India lives in the small hamlets of the villages where we are still working. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sonali, for this very innovative idea putting into this your presentation of delinking water rights from the land rights. I think that's really incredible because many efforts are being into this direction, but still we are not getting the breakthrough in this direction. So thank you for that. Then I will invite Dr. Neha Bhadbade from SOPECOM. Dr. Neha is research fellow at SOPECOM and a PhD in biosystem and agriculture engineering from Oklahoma University in United States. Dr. Neha specializes in hydrology, environmental flows, river basin management, and the PIM, that's participatory irrigation management. Her work also covers a lot of assessment of digital tools, and with the collaboration with TMG and the other organizations, they are working into the Tembu lift irrigation projects for improving the overall governance through the digital apps. So I request Neha to present her work and also respect the time of given slot of 15 minutes. So Neha, please.
I'll go ahead. Thanks, Ishwar, for that generous introduction. Honestly, I'd like to say upfront that I don't consider myself as an expert on the subject of digitalization nor water governance. And I honestly feel that I'm still a student learning from many, many experts and stalwarts here present in the room. So my presentation actually is based on a research we did with the TMG research group, which is a think tank based out of Berlin, Germany. And this research spanned across roughly 6 to 8 months at a few selected sites in India. So I would like to be pardoned, if at all, for my limited understanding on the subject, and I honestly would love to be enlightened by the expertise in the audience in the discussion session that follows. So to begin with, actually, this project that we did was a part of the CIVO Lab project. which is basically an action research-oriented project. It's a large project in Africa and in India, and they have 3 different themes. One is the urban agriculture, nutrition. The second is the ecosystem-based climate adaptation, and then women's access to land. So we collaborated on the second work stream, which was on the ecosystem-based climate adaptations. And this was largely to look at how local support systems can provide the last mile connectivity through facilitating digital information and for climate adaptation per se. So I'll quickly get into the presentation here. I think the challenges in the water sector were largely highlighted by Dr. Ishwar at the beginning of when he set the context for the webinar. So I don't really want to delve too much into delve deep into too much what these challenges are. Of course, I would like to say that a water sector is a very large sector within India, considering all the diverse users and uses, including ecosystem services. So my presentation for this per se here will be limited only to water use in agriculture and water governance per se related to agriculture. So I'm limiting the scope of the presentation. But having said that, we do know that there is an increasing demand for water, and the 12 major river basins that we have a per capita water availability of less than 1,000 cubic meters. And according to Falcon Mark Index, it should be roughly at least 1,700 cubic meters. As rightly pointed out by Dr. Ishwar Kale and Arjuna, climate risks have increased. This year, we've seen crazy floods in the north and also droughts. The threat of drought is already looming over southern part of India. There's a large monsoon deficit, and if the monsoon doesn't pick up, we know we're running in for shortage, especially in the monsoon season. Again, the whole issue of inequity was really succinctly put together by Dr. Ishwar Kale, where he said that more extraction is by larger farmers, which is backed by the laws, where especially related to groundwater, if what's below you, it belongs to you is the concept. And then that largely, what it does, it discriminates, it leads to poor access to people who don't have land, especially the landless communities that are largely marginalized and vulnerable groups. Local institutions that we have, which are currently in form of, when it comes to water governance in India, in form of water users associations or village water committees, or even gram panchayats, do not have, or I would say often have very little knowledge of the dynamics of the surface and groundwater systems and how to manage them in an integrated and sustainable manner. And I think this is where the role of NGOs is very important. They also lack technical capacities to derive water budgets. And I think generally it seems that, right now, when it comes to water governance in general, there is poor representation of vulnerable groups, especially women, Dalits, and you can say the ethnic communities. Since my topic is on the digitalization, again, digitalization in natural resource management in India is a very broad topic, and I'd like to restrict it specifically to water. Over the past couple of decades, we've seen that digitalization has rapidly increased in the natural resources sector. Like, for example, you can take the role of RSGIS. Now there are drone surveys, now even Internet of Things, which has really transformed in the way we collect data, understand land use, drainage systems, topography, including monitoring of different natural resources, well monitoring, for example, and also giving different advisories, weather advisories to the communities. But even though we have actually transformed in the way we collect data and how this information helps our decision support, it does pose a challenge of the digital divide. And this whole term digital divide, I think I can talk for it for a long time, but I'd rather restrict it right now to these two terms of how sometimes access to information can be affected, accessibility can be affected because of the social fabric we have, which includes caste and patriarchy per se. So we feel that, digitalization needs some kind of critical appraisal to understand how we can effectively use it, how it can be made more equitable across diverse stakeholders so that it becomes a good vehicle for good governance. So having said that, the idea of this research was basically to learn from various initiatives in water sector and to understand how local institutions use digital tools in participatory water monitoring, water budgeting, and water sensitive crop planning. So the idea of doing this was basically to inform our action. So when we did this research from November to February, it panned. The idea was that the findings of this research would actually inform the pilot action research that we are currently doing in Atpadi. For the lack of time, I'm not going to be talking much about that research, the ongoing research, but what we actually did during the research we did in the scoping sites. So moving on to the selection criteria for this scoping studies, the idea was basically to understand that how we selected these sites was basically what is the present status of the water. So the overall water health, I mean holistically, quality, the quantity, what is the governance system, what are the basically how are the water budgets calculated, if at all any. Also, we wanted to see what are the different local institutions present there. What about equity? How many vulnerable groups, or is there social inclusion within the process of water governance? And also to the extent to which digital tools are being used and how the digital information is shared. So these were some of the selection criteria or deciding factors on how we selected the scoping study sites. Moving on to there, from there, we based on our selection criteria, we came across these 3 sites which we visited, and we studied the digital tools that are being used for local water management. So the first one was Foundation for Ecological Security in Bhilwara, Rajasthan. The second one was Arid Area Communities and Technology Act in Kutch, Gujarat. And the third was by Gram Vikas in Gajapati in Odisha. So I'm going to quickly dive into the field insights itself. This is the first case study. You can see the landscape here in Bhilwara where we visited. This was one of the villages we visited, largely arid, semi-arid to arid region. So we visited 3 villages here, Dhanwada, Savrapura, and Amratya. As I said, largely arid to semi-arid, receiving a rainfall of 600 to 700 millimeters. They're all majorly dependent on local water, that is local surface, and most of their water sources are wells and bore wells. There is no exogenous water or any irrigation scheme in this village. With respect to internet connectivity, I could say that the internet connectivity is poor to moderate in this region. I'll come to the digital tools that they're using, because these are all, and you can see this here in this slide, these are all the different digital tools that actually FES has developed. These are all in-house. You can visit the website downstairs, India Observatory, where they have a platform where they have this entire repository of these different tools. The composite landscape assessment and restoration tool, CLART, which is largely used for determining different land use patterns, recharge and discharge area, which helps design watershed development projects. And the design estimation tool is for actually estimating the costs for that. They have a very interesting crop water budgeting tool, where you can enter the crop information, the crop taken, the area, and then it spits out an entire budget for or the water requirement for the entire season. They also have a groundwater monitoring tool, and I think this is an open source platform that they have on the India Water Repository, where you can see the groundwater levels across where this is being used and monitored. Experimental games per se is actually not a digital tool, but it's a tool. It's a game that they use to sensitize different communities on individual versus collective actions for crop choices and its impact on water. So specifically in Bhilwara, the use was on Clark. This is a participatory tool. They use it with the help of the community so that they can understand their natural resources and help understand the recharge and discharge areas. They're also using groundwater monitoring tool. However, out here, there's no continuous monitoring. It's only done twice. One is before monsoon and one is after monsoon. And only a few people, like the key informants in the villages, actually go ahead and do this crop water management, groundwater monitoring. Crop water budgeting tool, I think what's happening with this tool right now is it's more NGO driven. The community per se is not using it. They're filling in the form information manually, and then the CRP, which stands for the community resource person, are actually inputting all that data in the app, and then the water balance is generated. So you can see those pictures there. And this water balance, the printout is then shared with the village, based on which they then, whether it's a surplus or a deficit, they decide together on how we want to change the cropping pattern, if at all. So our overall observations with respect to the FES was that they do have a scarcity of water, especially even for domestic and drinking, especially in Savrapura and Dhanwada, because I don't think they've been able to ground those tools and get to that point where the water governance is at that level where they're collectively managing the groundwater resources. Also, there is no shared understanding of the aquifer here right now. So the water management is only at village scale. It's not at aquifer scale. On the other hand, Amaratya actually is a little bit more water surplus because they have been doing this for 30 years. The whole intervention here actually for all these three villages is through protection of grazing land. So they're actually protecting grazing lands, and their water harvesting structures are largely located in these. And that's how they are trying to also enhance their local water and strengthen the local water regime. So if you can see strong village institutions, they are in Amaratya, they're not in Dhanwada and Savrapura right now. We could not notice. Largely the community homogeneity was observed. We're mostly Gujars, so we did not explicitly observe any social exclusion within this village. When it comes to equity, there is access to water to everyone right now. However, we did observe that a lot of people are sensitized to the impact of individual versus collective action on cropping patterns, but the use of digital tools in the community overall is very low. So the second insight that comes is from arid area communities and technologies in Gujarat. Here again, we visited three villages, Mota, Badia, Bidada, and Pragadi. This is again a very arid region, 300 to 400 millimeters of rainfall. Geological setting is largely metamorphosed limestone and sandstone. Again, the internet connectivity, I would say, is pretty good. Large dependence on bore wells and tube wells. In terms of digital tools, they don't have any customized digital tools like how FES has developed in-house. They are in the process of developing it. Right now, they are relying largely on Excel sheets, WhatsApp, and Google Forms for data transfer, data collection, and monitoring. I'll just quickly come to the observations, particularly for this region. I think when it comes to Mandvi block, this is where these three villages are located. And Mandvi, as you know, is very close to the coastal region. Salinity and seawater intrusion is a major concern. And that's why I think this is a very limiting factor when it comes to measurement of water use. And a lot of farmers are actually measuring the amount of water they're applying. So in many clusters that we saw, we visited 2-3 clusters. We could not conduct village scale FGDs here because of this ongoing sowing season and the farmers were not available. But in the few clusters that we visited, there is importance given to actual measurement of water because salinity can render soils infertile if excess of water is applied. So this was a very limiting factor. Salinity as a limiting factor was found there. They also have an informal water management aquifer scale committee called the Kankavati Bhugarbha Vyavasthapan Manch, which actually translates to Kankavati Aquifer Management Forum. where they have also developed, so ACT has developed this 3D model actually to understand what's the characteristics of the Kankavati aquifer. So in that model, you can actually see that black on the right, the dark black line, which actually represents a dike. And that dike actually limits the accessibility of the water on the upstream, downstream sides, on the downstream side, as you see. So these kind of things within the 3D model actually help the farmers understand, where to tap water, how to build their water harvesting structures, so on and so forth. Another thing that we found interesting is that they've developed this whole cadre of barefoot hydrologists, or the Bhujal Jankars that they call, which is a village level cadre. Their role is extremely crucial. These village people, they belong to the communities, and they are the biggest gap between ACT and they are the bridge between the communities and ACT, where they help implement all these different initiatives in terms of participatory groundwater management. Currently, largely done through Atal Bhujal Yojana, and most of their interventions are around recharging defunct bore wells. So as I said, that the development of the digital app is still in progress. Another important thing, one very important social innovations that I would like to highlight here, apart from the volumetric measurement of water we saw, is you can see a picture on the bottom right where you can see a farmer himself has developed this tool. So it's just a pipe which is about a couple of inches above ground, and it has a drip on which he's growing apple bore. So once this fills up, he knows that, all his land has enough soil, is moisture, and enough irrigation to effectively use that soil moisture and water for his apple bores. So these are some of the social innovations that they are using.
May I request to speed up, and you can just skip the next the case actually, and give your last the oral observation.
Yeah. So I think I'll quickly go through this. The last was in Anusahi region in Gajapati district, which is by Gram Vikas. You can see this area. It's in the eastern Ghats. High rainfall in contrast with the other regions, 1900 mm. But again, largely dependent on groundwater, especially springs, which are tapped through small dug wells, which they call chuas. Internet connectivity is absolutely poor. An interesting tool that they are using for monitoring here is mWater. It's an open source based tool, a digital tool, which is used for data collection. It is developed by USAID and WaterAid. So the observations here were that this was a drinking and sanitation program, which eventually evolved into Water Secure Gram Panchayat program. And spring shed conservation and management. Largely, they're using mWater for geotagging springs and collecting data like parameters like well depths, spring discharge. And then they have a village development community, which is using this for actually taking decisions on water. And they've appointed a person called Jal Bandhu, which is a paid position, and they keep a record of all these. mWater is then, the data is actually then used for creating a water passbook, which they call it, which is nothing but actually a water budget or a water balance. So I'll quickly come into what we found from these. I would say that, all these three gave us good insights on what are the different local innovations and local tools people are using. But overall assessment, and I wouldn't call it an assessment, an observation from these studies, we felt that which would inform our ongoing research were a few that I'm going to talk in just a minute now. One is the needs assessment for grounding the digital tools or creating a sense of ownership. We felt that right now, most of these tools were NGO driven. So basically, NGOs have developed these for larger understanding of water, natural resources, ease of data collection, and better visualization. So these tools have great benefits, but they definitely require a good hand-holding effort. Now, I don't really mean to demean any organization here who have developed these tools, because I do believe that the rationale for developing these tools comes from years of research and understanding that they have developed with the communities and also the region. However, we do feel that, co-production of the tool with the people definitely does have an added advantage of creating a better sense of ownership and a larger buy-in for the community and the tool itself. The second thing we felt was the need of the technical person. So here the role of the CRP, Jal Sevak, Bhujal Jankar, and Jal Bandhu is, or whatever you can call them, becomes extremely critical. Here the thing is that basically what happens once the project is over? How do you ensure that post-project sustainability? How do you ensure that the adoption of the tool continues after that? So the idea is, as at least we observed in Gram Vikas, the Jal Bandhu is a paid position under the VDC. We need to have some sort of similar positions where the person can handhold this tool effectively even after the project is over. The other thing is this: digital tools must not replace or dilute participatory processes. I mean, we do know that there are different RSGIS-based tools. I mean, I'm just giving out an example out there, basically. And what generally it can do is basically, under the pretext of efficiency or attaining better results, it can actually dilute the participation of the people. So we must ensure that the participation of the people remains intact when it comes to water governance and the decisions that they take on their own resources. Again, here we felt that the complexity of the digital tools can undermine the community participation. So farmers really don't fill up information or data if the tool is too complex, or then they need to be incentivized if at all this tool has to be used, or there needs to be a continuous adoption of these tools. Though good infrastructure is indispensable, focus should be on gender equality and social inclusion. And agreed, because no amount of internet penetration and use can actually ameliorate the digital divide that we see because of the social fabric within the villages, which could be affected due to caste, class, and patriarchy. So unless and our research has shown that, for example, women tend to have much lesser access to digital information and use of smartphones. So this is just one example per se. I was in two minds actually talking about whether I should even talk about open source versus customized digital tools, but I yet put this out here because we within our organization have also been debating about what is better, open source or customized digital tools. I would still say that both have their pros and cons, whereas open source tools are cheaper, much more accessible, and do have larger, you can say, post-project sustainability in terms of, because the hosting and other concerns, etc. Currently, they're kind of just limited to data collection, and the backend process is extremely,
Neha,
tedious.
a request, please conclude because you already crossed the time.
I'm sorry. And I'll just take one more, just half a second. Yeah. So, and with respect to customized digital tools, I think it does have different advantages in terms of what it can offer, especially larger buy-ins. So if there is the digital tool can actually be largely bought later on or integrated within the government framework, then I think it would have a larger impact and can be upscaled that way. And ultimately, I think the data ownership must remain with the communities. So with this, I'd like to thank a lot of people, especially folks at the TMG Research Group, Larissa especially, and also all my team members in SOPECOM here. And of course, last but not the least, EcoBari for this wonderful opportunity. And I'm sorry for shooting over the time. Yeah.
Thank you, Neha, for this very important insight in how this whole digital tool can be seen with different dimensions of what purpose they serve as an outcome for the community in making the decisions. So after these two wonderful presentations, I would like to pose few important questions or some concerns in regarding how the sustainability part can be really ensured into this the different type of initiative. And in digital tools, of course, there are different type of questions we can pose into this. So let me share my screen, and I will share as Arjuna has already shared, I guess, the framework of the EcoBari. I will just want to highlight, I guess it's visible, no? My screen? Yeah.
Yes, Ishwar, it's visible. And at this stage, I would also like to invite Dr. Sonali Shinde to also turn on her camera. We would like to have all the three panelists with the cameras on. Thank you.
So in a brief, because the overall initiative by the Pani Panchayat and the Gram Gaurav Pratishthan and even the Neha talk about these three different initiatives are really good in a terms of this whole participatory governance, the inclusiveness, the institutions into that, and the enabling this whole decision making support system for the improving the level of governance into that. But we have to also see how these initiatives are covering and focusing the other component of this, like this healthy ecosystems, in terms of how this initiative, after making the supply side available or the more water available, how this demand side has been really taken care in terms of this appropriate crop choices, crop plans, the agroforestry into that, the water saving practices. I think these are very crucial in terms of the demand side level type of thing, where this the ecosystem needs, the biodiversity, the appropriate crops, the diversification into the crops can be also taken place. So that is also the one of the crucial area this initiative has to be focused into that. And of course, this whole climate threat, how we become or make this the people cope up with this whole issue, or build their adaptive capacity to cope up with this, the different and the disastrous situation. Because unless they have this contingency plan, or the how to address if there is a drought, or there's a like a low rainfall, or the gap between two good rainfall years. So this is the situation how we have to build their capacities to deal with this changing situation. So I want to make a point, unless we touch these two important aspects also, along with the governance, the climate change adaptations and this whole ecosystem here, will be really, it will be really good that we, in a totality, in a comprehensiveness, we address this whole water management picture. So considering this, I will like to pose two questions to Dr. Sonali and two to Neha, and then we'll open it for the few question and answer from the chat box. So Sonali, as you rightly said, that means, of course, your work is really commendable in terms of that whole equitable water sharing. But you said that as this whole the small is beautiful, means it's well understood. But the challenge is how we can replicate this very innovative, important initiative at the large scale. Unless we understand the constraint and limitation of this, it will be very difficult to take it at across the different states, or like the different regions into that. And there is a wide scope of this type of replication. So what are you understand are the limitations or the constraint in replicating this initiative at the large scale? Dr. Sonali, will you just like to briefly comment on this?
Yes. So on a larger scale, we need more of green jobs, people who are educated in this watershed development programs. There is lack of people at the ground level, grassroots level. And even the government officials, the staff is very less for the region. What we see now is one person is managing many villages or tehsils also. So at this point, I feel our education system, or even the education system, needs to be getting involved in the rural development programs. And when I talk about one village, it is also cluster of villages, no, we can develop together. So as the cluster becomes larger, because one village is changing, the others are also seeing, they also, and the watershed is always shared by a number of villages. So now we are doing that also, developing it in a cluster of villages also, that we call it.
Sonali, as you are aware, this whole water user association is the big, the space we have provided with a lot of infrastructure with this Jala Sampada and the water user association at the different scale. So do you see the possibility of getting replicated through this water user associations model of these ideas?
Yes, yes. If it is properly established and properly managed, and people are given trainings on that also, I feel it can be replicated. But there has to be proper understanding and management also. And role of NGO is also very important, because once the NGO is also present, then it is easier for the people to, come together and take it ahead. So I feel it's the government, the people, and the NGO together have to, establish this water users. Because in Purandar now the Gunjavni water is going to come from the Velle, they are bringing this water. But whenever water from another watershed is coming to any region, it has to be also studied and distributed and divided properly, So there is a lot of groundwork is needed for the distribution. And
Okay. Thank you for that. I think the another question, the small question for you, that as you know that the water supply is one thing actually with this lift irrigation or water user association. But how these crop choices, demand management, water use efficiency, that's a bigger challenge into this whole the water supply type of system. So you rightly said that in your earlier experiences, you made some sort of the bans on this sugarcane or the bananas into that. But how challenging it is actually in the current days with these demands are increasing and the people are really following it?
Actually, in some regions where there is no water, people are going for their choices like fruit orchards, and they are, taking some cash crops, some vegetables. But wherever there is availability of water, they see there is water available and the groundwater is also good, they are going for sugarcane, because that's our policy, that at the policy level, we have given subsidy to sugarcane. So they know, and nowadays there are many challenges in the farming. You don't get farm laborers also. So people find it very easy, harvesting of the sugarcane and just giving water, and we call it as a lazy farmer's crop. So once the water is available, people are going for sugarcane. That's the reality.
Yeah, thank you, Sonali. Neha, just you showed very interesting case studies into that. Just a question to you, because see, into this whole apps or what you can say the digital tools, data is a very crucial part actually. So how this data security or the data confidentiality has been considered into this? Is there some sort of the observation on this? Because unless the data is confidential and the people will not share their all details into that in terms of their land holding, the crops, their water resources. So is there a reflection on this?
So yeah, so basically, as far as I know about M-Water, which we've also largely used even in our survey for socioeconomic and well mapping, it has its data privacy and data laws, which are also in sync with the EU regulation laws on data privacy and data concerns, data sharing and all. So that data largely belongs to the community itself. Now, if as an NGO, we do agree that we do have an access to this information. and it is open source. So there are options there. If you want to make it open source, you can make it open source, or if you want to keep it private, you can keep it private. So as far as mWater is concerned, it has very strict rules on data privacy and data ownership. I'm not too sure about what exactly is with the data related to the India Observatory, how FES is actually maintaining that record on the data privacy and the data ownership. I would like to believe that the data belongs to the community. However, I wouldn't be able to comment on that right now. And as far as you could say the Act's intervention is concerned, they're just having basic Google forms, which it takes in the information of the farmer, like the name and what crop or what area they're growing it on. So, and this is within the village, which is done by the community within the village. That is the Bhujal Jankar, who belongs to the community itself. So it's kind of a closed group where this data is being shared right now. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks. So considering time limit, we'll take very few questions from the chat box, and I'll start from the Neha. Neha, there is a question from Swati Sinha, because as you studied these 3 different cases, so according to your analysis, she's asking which is a more sustainable case, because the sustainability, we know that the long-term type of continuation of this whole systems into that. So any comment on that?
Wow, this is Swati. Actually, honestly, this is an extremely tough question in a way, because I would say that our work there, and I can't really comment on that with a very strong conviction, because our scoping study was so limited to just understanding a few things there. And unless we go there and understand a bit more, we can't really comment on which is going to be a very sustainable model per se. They're all NGOs which have actually built rapport over 30, 40 years, because they're working in that region. So I would believe that, digital innovations are just a medium right now to change the way they're actually collecting data there, and they're collecting information. So that does not change the way they're actually operating in the communities and the interventions they're doing. So with respect to just the digital tools per se, we really cannot extremely say that, which is good or which is bad here. It's just a choice that the community makes in terms of what they're comfortable with. Yeah. Including the
Thank you,
NGOs
Neha.
within the constraints they're working under. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. And to Sonali, there is a question from Lalit Mohan. He's interested to ask the package or the activities you are done into this Mahur village, because unless this activities, the set of activities is clear, the understanding impact is also not very the true. So will you just throw very quick focus on that, actually, the set of activities you did into Mahur?
Yeah. So first of all, there was the dam, means people could just see the water, and which was not available to them. It was only available to the downstream villages. So first the permission was taken to lift the water for the community lift irrigation scheme. So certain dams, they give the permission only for 8 months, because 4 months that water is reserved as a drinking water for many other villages closer by. Especially in Purandar, every dam they observe that the 4 months they try to, preserve the water. So first it was the 8-month permission of lifting the water. And then the people managed, they formed a community lift irrigation. There was one person who was looking after the distribution of the water. It was employed by the community lift irrigation scheme. And then, so everything went smooth, and the farmers also decided the cropping pattern. Also, they came together and they sold their produce unitedly in the Pune city, So that also saves a lot of money. And so unity, I feel, was the key for development of this project and going ahead, and even it's working fine today, is that the community has a certain understanding that whatever the water they have to share, and whatever they get by, and what everywhere we see that whenever the farmer is getting the water, they don't look back on working hard on the fields, they never are lazy, like, so they will always till the soil and get the produce. So they are very good at it. So today, what is happening is we are giving everything else to the farmer than the water. So that's the first thing, is if assured water is provided, then farmers are quite knowledgeable.
Yeah, true, very true. So thank you, both speakers. And I think there are a number of questions, but we'll share later your contact details with them, and in case they can get back to you with their queries and questions. So I stop here with the very important comment that this whole equity and justice put by this whole Pani Panchayat initiative. Of course, it was put into this 1970s, but still it's very relevant, and the state is also struggling for making it practical. So a lot of learnings can be taken from this initiative. And as Neha shared, that there is a wonderful tools, very useful tools for this whole increasing transparency and accountability. Of course, we have to take care that what level and how participatory these tools can be made for the people. So with this, I stop here and hand over to Arjuna and team. Thank you, Arjuna.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the facilitation and the challenge of moderating and also keeping time, Ishwar, and for the wonderful patience with which and the insights that Dr. Neha, Dr. Sonali gave in answering the questions. I think it would be like, we have this realization of the dream of Ecobari to be able to discuss these kind of good practices and to try to leverage the learnings that are already available, and to also see how more effectively we can reach the communities in whose lives we want to make a difference, to solve initiated by the vision of our founder director, Dr. Marcela D'Souza, who's also the director of WCRES. So before we end, I would like to call Dr. Marcela to say a few words at this point.
I would like to thank every one of you, all the participants who have been here, for your active participation. I know there was a lot of active listening that was going on into this event. And thank you, Sonali and Neha, for the very rich inputs that you contributed to a very sensitive topic. And that topic, which is very crucial in an ecosystem-based adaptation approach, is the governance, is the equity, is the sharing. And the tools that we are looking at and the method that Pani Panchayat has been doing over the years are worth looking to see how can these all contribute towards management of our resources, of our ecosystems, particularly water, and the equity and the sharing of it. I think this is it's a very sensitive issue and extremely important. Without this community management, without tools to help us modernize, and I agree with you, Neha, that these have to come into the hands of the community, where the communities can take it forward. I think these are things that have been extremely important. I just want to share a little bit over here. In the last few days, maybe in the last week, I've heard of 2 different tools for water management, but where they are looking at tools which will be used by the individual farmer. And this I saw as a very big threat, because it goes back to the individualization of the natural resources. And none of us can succeed in the long run unless we flow and treat the natural resources as a common pool resource. It belongs to everyone. We all contribute to its growth, to its improvement, to its sustainability, and to our survival, or we all perish with it, sooner or later. So I think this was a very interesting, a very important inputs that you all brought into this. I also saw a number of the comments. I didn't see all of them come in. We look forward to more and more suggestions coming in from the participants. I was happy that we had, I think about 62 or 63 participants who were there, which is a good one for the so many workshops that are taking place. I think there's a lot of interest, and we need to grow forward. Slowly but surely, the management of our natural resources is most crucial to our sustainability and the future. We look forward to connecting with you all, and thank you for your participation, which is important for all of us. And we look forward to keeping in touch, to learning more and more, from what we do very well, where we need to improve, how we need to change, working towards the sustainability of our resources and the management of it in a climate change situation that we are in. Thank you very much. And it was a very interesting evening, and I participated in the entire one, so I can assure you that I did enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcella. And for all those who have still stayed with us till the end, we just have two quick questions at the end, a poll to understand what you think is the main takeaway for you from today's session. And just in case you have any thoughts about what else you would like EcoBari to address in a future session. So two just quick questions, feel free to drop in your answers and disconnect at your convenience. So, yeah. While this is going on, I'd just like to once again thank Neha, Dr. Neha, Dr. Sonali for making the time to be with us today.
It's our pleasure, and we really appreciate this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Just to confirm, we will also be sharing the recording of this with you soon. So if in case you have colleagues who missed out, feel free to share it with them.
Actually, I just want to share something for
please go on.
Listened over here. Yesterday I was listening to the TV, and on BBC they were talking about the whole issue in the Hawaii island of Maui, and what was the key issue. And the key issue was also there that there were many outsiders who had now inhabited Maui, not the traditional indigenous communities, and who now owned the water resources. They were growing sugarcane and others. They did not allow the water to be used to quench, to put off the fires. That came up as a big topic. And when I heard that, we were talking and we said, wow, this issue of water ownership is becoming something that will destroy us. So I think that was a big learning for me. I forgot to say it a little earlier when there were a few more people, but that's fine.
Yeah, very true.
Privatization of water. And they allowed the island to burn, but not give water. Allowed the people to die, but not give the water.
Yeah.
That's really sad.
Great. So thanks for all those who were able to answer that question about your main takeaway and also topics, issues that you would like EcoBari to address next. Please look out for our announcement. We'll be having the next webinar in October, and these sessions are always much of a learning experience for us, and also we hope for you. My colleague has shared the recording for the first webinar that we had in June, which was on water issues. We'll also share the recording of this webinar with all of you soon. So thanks, and wish you all a nice day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are.